If you have your Bibles with you or your Bible app, can you turn with me to Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 to 16. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you that we can gather today to hear your word explained to us. I pray that you'll give each of us a spirit of humility, soften our hearts to hear your message, apply your message to us, and help us to be transformed and live it out in the weeks to come. Be with Pastor Richard as he preaches. Thank you for his gift of preaching and his leadership of this church. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, from my side, REC family, good morning. It's good to see that there are still some people left in Joburg on this long weekend. So thank you for being in Joburg this weekend, but thank you especially for coming out this morning to keep company with one another as we worship and pray and study God's word together. I'm especially glad that you're here today. It's an exciting Sunday. Every Sunday is exciting. Every Sunday is important. But this particular Sunday we've been waiting for a long time. I've been waiting for a long time. This passage on being salt and light is one that I've looked forward to. It's a very familiar passage to a lot of Christians for all the obvious reasons. It encapsulates so much of what it means to be a Christian. But for me and for our church, it also encapsulates so much of what we've taught about our kind of heart for this church in the city of Joburg over the last few years. If you've been around Rosebank for a while, we take some time to just speak about our mission and vision. And this Salt and Light passage just like packs so much of what we've already said into how we live out what God is calling us to be in Joburg, which is why we've waited for this Sunday to launch our Second Places ministry to you, which you've been working on for a long time, because it's so helpful in the Second Places ministry in how we live out being salt and light, but also in kind of just extending our mission kind of as a church. So I'm excited for you to see that. But before we get there and to the salt and light passage in particular, we're going to have to first take a step back and do a little bit of foundational work. So I think it's really important that before we even get to verse 13 to 16, our passage for today, that we just take some time to see this passage in the context of the all-important Sermon on the Mount, right? This, the one longest recorded sermon of Jesus in the Gospels, is up on a mountainside, that just a lot of what it means to be a Christian is packed into this sermon. Not everything, but so much. I mean, for real, if you kind of had someone who's new to Christianity and they were asking, man, what does it mean to live like a Christian? I mean, it wouldn't be a bad thing for them to just read the Sermon on the Mount. And so Jesus starts the sermon, he opens it very powerfully by talking about what constitutes blessing. Like what constitutes being in a state of being blessed, which is very different to how the world might think about that. And so that's what you looked at last week in those 8 statements, 8 lines that say, blessed are those who, blessed are those who, blessed are those who. And it's this repetition of blessed are those who that has led to that part of the Sermon on the Mount being known as the Beatitudes. And Beatitudes is just simply a contracted way of saying the beautiful attitudes. That's what Beatitudes means. Some of you in the know are like, man, he's not reading the right commentary there. That's not what it means. Because actually, I mean, yes, true, it comes from the Latin word beatus, which means blessed. That's why it's called the Beatitudes. But I mean, who knows Latin anyway? And truly, I really do think it's such a helpful way of describing that opening passage of the Sermon on the Mount. These are beautiful attitudes that should describe the followers of Jesus even today. So let's just kind of go back over that a little bit. So Anthony read the first 4 of them as at the beginning of the service, as we just kind of focused on entering into worship. Let me read the last 4 for you. So from verses 6, I think, onwards. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So there's the first 8 Beatitudes, blessed are statements. And then verse 11 and 12 are interesting, because I don't know if you picked this up last week. Verse 11 and 12 kind of seem like they are connected to the Beatitudes, that first 8 statements, but are also not connected to it. So let's read that again. Verse 11 goes on, and so it says, blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So can you see how that's a little bit confusing? Because it opens with blessed are those. So you're thinking, if you were listening to Brett last week and he said there's 8, you're like, no, you're counting, and there's 9. Because here is another statement that starts with blessed are, but the subject of verse 11 is persecution, which was the subject of verse 10. And it also has other differences to it. It's much longer than the other ones. It's in the second person, not the third person. It includes something about the prophets, which none of the others do as well. It includes a triple blessing, not just a promise and a blessing. And so it's clearly connected to the beautiful attitudes, but also not connected to the 8 beautiful attitudes. Why? And the simple reason is because the verse 11 and 12 is forming a bridge out of the beautiful attitudes into the next passage, which is the salt and light passage. All of that to say, this is not really that complicated. Matthew, as technical as he is, and yes, Brett mentioned that last week, and I got that, I heard that part, and I do love that he's technical. He's doing something very specific here. Matthew wants to be sure that we connect the salt and light passage to the beautiful attitudes passage, right? Because if you're just reading it, it just seems like a jump. He's just like, okay, we're done with that. Now on to salt and light. And just heads up, Jesus does in this sermon, we'll see, he will go quite quickly from topic to topic, but he's not doing that here. There's a deliberate connection between the beautiful attitudes and salt and light. In fact, those two together form the introduction to this monumental Sermon on the Mount, kind of lays the platform. That's how important the Beatitudes are. That's how important the salt and light passage together is. It's laying the foundation for everything that's to come. However, if salt and light passage is connected to the beautiful attitudes passage, as I'm saying it is, and if the bridge between them, Matthew is using the theme of persecution, then we have some thinking to do. Right, so let me just kind of brief you on how things will progress today. When we get to the salt and light passage, which we will eventually get to, it's not complicated, right? But we have got to do a little bit of thinking work first, right? Because if Beatitudes and salt and light are connected, and if the connection is persecution, then, well, there's some things we got to think about. Here's what I mean. The Beatitudes are beautiful attitudes. They are personal characteristics that a Christian receives by the grace of God upon the moment of their repenting and entering into the kingdom. Remember, that's chapter 3 and chapter 4, this idea of repenting. So the beautiful attitudes are what Christians receive by the grace of God on entering the kingdom, but they are also characteristics or attitudes that are supposed to be cultivated in the process of discipleship for the rest of their lives. But they are, all 8 of them, deeply internal, deeply personal attitudes. However, here's the point. Just because these beautiful attitudes are personal, and they really are deeply personal, does not mean they are private. And I say that again, this is the whole ball game right here with the bridge. These Beatitudes, just because they are personal, which they are, does not mean they are private. They are meant to be boldly lived out in public view in ways that are tangible. That's the point. They're meant to be, these beautiful attitudes are meant to be seen and felt like light and salt. I made that rhyme just so you could remember it. Worked hard on that particular rap item there for you all. It's the point. This is where some thinking about this is so important, because if you had to summarize the beautiful attitudes, as Ansane did and as Brett did, the first four perhaps more belonging to how we relate to God, and the second four how we relate to each other, you could summarize the beautiful attitudes as humility towards God, mercy towards one another. You could summarize it like that. But humility, especially, and mercy can easily be privatized. You know, you think about it and we pray about it, but then we go on our lives without boldly living them out in public. Do you have a sense of what I'm saying? You know, like to be humble is such an inner, and sure, when you see it in someone, you see it, but gentle as well. It's not out there. It's not obviously external. And so we could be tempted to just take these beautiful attitudes and just internalize them. And they are located internally. But the point of connecting them to salt and light is they're meant to be lived out boldly in the public eye. I mean, kind of that song that we sang, I just noticed that the line now, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me. Like as people are seeing us, these attitudes should be tangible to the general public view. And it goes without saying that I mean public view, I mean like general public view, not just like Christians. These beautiful attitudes are not just characteristics that we express when we come together on a Sunday morning. You know, so when you drive into church and there's a bit of a parking jam, as is known to happen at RUC, you know, and you're like, someone takes your parking spot and you're like, bless you, brother, you know, because you're at church. But then like when you're at like the shopping center, you're like, you know, this is meant to be the general kind of public view. And really there's a temptation here. We're more likely to live these ways kind of within this community, but the point of salt of the earth and light of the world is these beatitudes are supposed to be lived out everywhere we go. I mean, I have experience with this too. It's like kind of I drive a little bit differently when I'm close to church proximity. You know, when I'm going around these streets, you know, I like a little more kind towards people and, you know, bless you, which is probably mainly because I'm worried that it's someone from church. So I go, dude, and then it's Ansane, you know, that could be really awkward. So, but that's the point is these beautiful, the point of the bridge is for us to see these beautiful attitudes as something that's meant to be boldly lived out in the general public eye. I mean, I can't emphasize this enough, just how important that opening to the Sermon on the Mount is, the beautiful attitudes, but also how they're meant to be lived out in public. The world doesn't live like this. If you take all of those peacemaking tendencies and meek, I mean, good grief, is anyone meek naturally in the world? The world doesn't live like this. But when we do, in the midst of a watching world, then we shine a bright light. That's the whole point here. So that answers the question about the connection, 11 and 12, between beautiful attitudes and salt and light. But that doesn't answer the question about why Matthew in particular, as a bridge, uses the theme of persecution. That doesn't make sense, actually. I mean, it seems strange, because it doesn't seem like, just think with me, just try to think about what's strange about this. When you live out the beautiful attitudes, like if we actually do this, so we're gentle, peacemaking, humble, merciful, like people, it doesn't seem like if we lived like that, the world would get mad at us. It doesn't seem, there's nothing objectionable in the beautiful attitudes. Am I right? Like for most of the watching world, they're like, that's nice. It's not generally going to lead to kind of intense sort of persecution. Like seriously, who's going to hate on a peacemaker? Or maybe that does happen sometimes. If you get into a fight and two people fighting each other, you get in and they both turn on you. I mean, maybe. But for the most part, you live out the beautiful attitudes. It doesn't seem like that's going to invite persecution. I mean, think about missionaries living in closed countries. I mean, Brett shared a story about that last week. they are for sure likely to be arrested when they are actively proselytizing, converting people. But if they just lived out the beautiful attitudes, it's unlikely that that would immediately invite persecution. So why is there this theme of persecution in living out the beautiful attitudes in public? Do you see what I'm wrestling with here? Here's the answer. It's quite simple, and it's in verse 11. Blessed are you when others revile you, persecute you, utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. On my account. So just get this, living out the beautiful attitudes means living like Christ. And living out the beautiful attitudes actually only happens because of the Spirit of Christ working in us. And so even though these qualities are potentially attractive qualities, make no mistake, they bear the marks of a person loyal to Jesus. And if you're aligned with Jesus, you will be persecuted, even if what you're doing is quite beautiful, because you're with Jesus. And there is opposition to the person of Jesus. We've already met him in the Gospels. There's something opposed to it. And he's still active in the world today. And so if you are with him, you will be persecuted. Fact. Just is. Doesn't matter what you're doing. If it bears the mark of a follower of Jesus, you will be persecuted, which seems unfair, doesn't it? I mean, obviously, like real persecution seems unfair, but it seems unfair. Like, why would someone, revile is mock, curse, like hate on. Why would someone revile me if I'm being merciful? Like, it seems blatantly, unfair or persecute. Like all of these qualities we live out, and we'll see later, like the intentions, whole salt and light is, our intentions and motivations are good for the world. So like, what are you guys, why are you hating on us when we're doing good things? And the reason is because we're aligned with Jesus. And I wanted to mention that. I just want to upload into your thinking, before we move on to the salt and light. We will get to the salt and light, but it's important to just load in there, because the salt and light passage, verse 13 to 16, oh man, when we get there, it's just beautiful. It's optimistic. It's awesome. But you have to recognize that even though when we live that out, we're motivated by the best intentions for the world around us, the point is, don't expect to be applauded. Don't expect to be applauded, and don't expect to be treated the same in return. This is where Christians get upset because it's unfair. Like at the very least, if I've been merciful towards you and gentle, like be the same towards me, like on the road. And the whole point is, don't expect we're going to live out this life and it's beautiful and it's awesome, but people won't see that. Don't expect applause. Don't expect it to be the same, treated the same in return. Probably the opposite. Instead of applause, you're going to get boo, boo. And instead of you being treated the same in return, you're likely to suffer abuse. But the point is, we're just going to put our heads down. We're going to live out these beautiful attitudes amidst a watching world, and come what may. This is who we are. This is what we do. That's the sense of this bridge into the salt and light passage. So without further ado, how about we get to the salt and light passage? So, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Now, in reflecting on the passage, the long one, what we could do is you could spend a lot of time on each metaphor, like salt, and deconstruct kind of all the usages of salt and therefore what it means to be a salty Christian today. You could do that. That probably is a helpful thing to do, but if you're going to do that, like in the commentaries, one guy listed 11 usages of salt. So the most obvious usage of salt is for flavor, seasoning, of course. Close second is, especially in ancient world, for preservation, to preserve meat. It's interesting, one of the commentaries I was reading was speaking about David Livingstone, great missionary in Africa, when he died in the heart of Africa, and his servant actually rubbed his whole body in salt so that it could be transported back to the UK so he could have his honorable burial. So for sure, preservation is there. But then there's other usages. It was used in sacrifice, special sacrifice, where salt is supposed to be thrown in, used as fertilizer, even used as, get this, rubbed onto babies to clean babies. So what you could do, if you're trying to unpack this passage and see what does that mean for being a Christian today, you could list all of those things and try and apply it. So for example, you could go, what does it mean that Christians are to give flavor to a bland world? And maybe that means, as I've read, kind of Christians are supposed to be the ones that are writing beautiful music, writing the best books, like etc. And sure, maybe that's part of it. One article I read spoke more about the salt and seasoning being a reflection of the final wedding feast with Christ. I don't even know kind of what that means for today. And then if you go down the list and you're like, okay, what does it mean, to clean a baby? How do Christians clean a baby? So you could get, my concern is if you go, it's not wrong to do that. A lot of community groups this week are going to have a whale of a time deconstructing these metaphors. But my concern is we miss the wood for the trees. I can't remember how the idiom goes. Might go the other way around. But you know what I mean? We miss the big picture. And so what I want to do this morning is, I think a better approach is to make sure we don't miss the big picture. And just heads up, in Jesus' parables, which we will get to this year still, that's always going to be a rule of thumb. Like, what's the big picture that we shouldn't miss? So salt and light are two metaphors used as a couplet. So the approach that I'm going to take this morning, you can take a different approach on your own. The approach I'm going to take is what commonality is there between salt and light? So let's make sure we don't miss the big principles that must apply to both things. You with me? Well, let me just get in and let's just say what I want to say about this. So firstly, what the salt and light metaphors together teach us about Christianity is that we are supposed to be present and visible. We're supposed to be present and visible. I know I spoke about this in the bridge. Here, in a more general sense, let me just say it simply. Christianity is not meant to be a private faith. Make no mistake, it is personal, it is deeply personal, but it's not meant to be private. If you ever doubted that, salt and light, like you can't miss it. It's so clear, so simple, so effective. I mean, if you think about it, the only way that salt is ineffective is if it stays in the salt shaker. If you've got your pot of soup and it's bland and the salt shaker is standing next to it and you never apply it, if the salt is not present in the bland soup, then it has no chance of making it taste better. In the same way, if you're going with the usage of salt, like there's no chance of salt preserving a meat from decaying unless it's rubbed into the flesh itself. Christianity is no good if it's isolated. Christianity is no good if it's isolated. You can't miss that in the salt and light metaphor. It's the same with light. The only way that a light that's actually on and shining in a dark room is ineffective is if you put a bucket over it. That's the only way that it could be ineffective, is if it's covered. So Christianity is meant to be present and visible. This metaphor is so encouraging. It's an encouraging metaphor. Salt and light. We spoke about light a few weeks ago, just how it mentions hope. It's so encouraging. But it's also quite a somber statement about the state of the world around us. It's loaded in here. Yes, you're a salt. Yay. Yes, you're a light. Awesome. But what it's saying is that the world is decaying and dark. That's somber. This metaphor is describing the reality of the world around us. There is great evil pressing in around us. Despair, anxiety, sadness, and things are getting worse. That's true. The metaphor, it's built in. That's true. Things are bad and getting worse. But the point is, as Christians, we don't run and we don't hide. The world is dark and it's decaying, But the point is not to extract ourselves from it, to protect ourselves. We are present and visible. A little while ago, there was a little conversation happening. It's a common conversation in certain groups these days around, about immigration. I know this is a touchy subject, but that was just one of the conversations. Someone was asking the worship leader, hey, are you thinking of leaving? And his answer, and I just love this. He said, you can't help by leaving. And I'm not making a statement. I'm not teaching on whether to immigrate or not immigrate today, but that principle is such. I think that's the essence of the big picture of salt and light, is that you can't help if you're not rubbed in. You can't be a light if it's covered. Christianity is no good if it's in isolation. And let me just make sure that I put the right kind of nuance to this subject, because for some people in some relationships or maybe in work environment or even at home where it's so hostile, but it's not hostility because you identify as a Christian, it's other, and there may be reasons to extricate yourself in certain situations, and that's a whole wisdom thing. But in general, this principle, this big broadcast that Christians should have on their mind is you can't help by leaving bad situations. The world is dark and the earth is decaying, and the point is that we're present and visible. We're engaged, living out these beautiful attitudes, and when we do that, good things happen. And that's the second point. This is where it gets awesome. So, Christians, salt and light, can't miss it. Present and visible. But number two, our presence is completely beneficial. Basically to say, the presence of Christians should improve the state of living for the people that surround them. Because you're there, it's a good thing you're there. Maybe I should just make the accuracy of that statement a little bit better and say not just being there, but living out the beautiful attitudes. Where that's happening, good things happen. Just because you're there. Again, you can't miss this. Salt is a good thing, despite what the doctors say today. It's you always have to do this little interpretive exercise these days, because even when Jesus said, I am the bread of life, people are like, is that gluten-free and organic? And, is bread's bad these days? No, it's good. Bread is good. It's a good metaphor. Salt is good, just no denying. It brings flavor, it preserves. It's a good metaphor. The presence of salt means goodness to the people around. Same thing with light. And it's quite amazing that Jesus has a lot of confidence when he says these things to his disciples and us. You are salt. You are light. Where you go, at home, work, play, first place, second place, third place. If you're genuinely living out the beautiful attitudes, light is being broadcast. Seasoning and preservation from decay is happening, whether you're conscious of it or not. It's a good thing you're there, Christian. It's a good thing that we're around. However, that's why I had to spend a little bit of time on the whole persecution deal, because if we just jumped into salt and light and we're like, yeah, I'm salt. Yeah, I'm not. Then as Christians, we'd be like, hey, world, we're here. You're welcome. We've arrived. Everything's going to be okay. But that's not going to be the reaction of the world, even though it is for the benefit of a dark and decaying world. That's not going to happen. We're going to be reviled, persecuted. And I know, we're living in a country where thankfully that's not an everyday threat like active persecution, but reviling, being mocked for being a Christian, certainly. At the very least, these days, Christians are overlooked. Can we at least say that? That's at the bottom of the level. But for example, where this just was in my mind just a few weeks ago at Easter weekend, actually. So I think it was on Good Friday. Kristen and I went into a certain grocery store, and I said the name at first service. I shouldn't have. It might be employees of a certain store. We went into a grocery store, well-known one, and as we walked in on Easter weekend, there was a big sign at the door just wishing well to all the Muslim customers and staff and wishing them happy Ramadan and Eid. And then later at the checkout aisle was another sign to Jewish customers and staff wishing them happy Pesach. Nothing for the Christians. I mean, nothing. I mean, this is Easter weekend. I mean, this is our biggest weekend. And again, I'm not complaining. That's not persecution. Let's be clear. That's not persecution. Guys from around the world are missionaries living under real persecution. They're like, man, that's not persecution. Yes, I know. But at the very least, we're overlooked, if not reviled, if not persecuted, and it's only going to get worse. We know this. But at the same time, don't think, Christian, that just because we're overlooked, just because we may be mocked, or just because we may be persecuted, don't think that we do not have a noble purpose for being here. That's what salt and light means. In other words, when you read, you are the salt of the earth, or you read, you are the light of the world, like you know, man, there's no reason to be embarrassed being a Christian. There's no reason to be ashamed at being a Christian. Yes, they won't get it. The world won't get it. We're just going to put our heads down, do what we do, live out the beautiful attitudes, no matter in full public view, and come what may. We have a noble purpose. You do not need to be embarrassed or be ashamed. Amen? It's a good thing that we're around. Number 3, very obvious point connected to both salt and light. And that is that, very simple, a little bit goes a long way. Have to see that in these metaphors. Have to see it. Little pinch of salt, boom, whole pot of soup, awesome. I'd better even if it's chili. I'm just kidding. A little bit of salt. Little bit goes a long way. Same with light. I mean, in a dark, dark room. You know, I mean, let's just say, as South Africans, like we own these metaphors these days. I mean, how do we not get it? I mean, darkness and like salted meat, like as our staple diet. I mean, we should be like living, but for real, like you're in a dark, dark room and you haven't charged your magneto light, you know, because we'll have one of those, and you just strike a match. The whole room changes like a tiny light. This got to be a principle here. Salt and light, a little bit goes a long way. Here's the point. Christians will always be outnumbered in society. When we pray and sing for revival, we'll always be outnumbered. Wide is the road that leads to destruction, and many walk on it, but narrow is the road that leads to life, and few walk along it. We'll always be outnumbered. We will never be the moral majority. But we don't need to be the moral majority, because a little bit goes a long way. And so you may be outnumbered in your neighborhood. You likely are. You may be outnumbered in your workplace. I mean, you likely are, unless you work here at RUC. Then you only have good Christian people around you. But you will be outnumbered. You may be outnumbered as a Christian in your family. But a little bit goes a long way. So again, we just put our heads down. We live out the beautiful attitudes. We be who we are at home, work, and play in full public view, and come what may, knowing that even a little bit can go a long way. Now, you may be forgiven for thinking this is overly optimistic. And man, I told you, verse 13 to 16 is that's our pump-up verse. It is. It's bold. It's optimistic. You may be thinking, yeah, like what chance really of that? Well, just look at Jesus gives us to the first group of disciples. They walk away, a handful of them, or maybe a room full of them, who live this out. And what's the result? We're here today. The light of the world has literally heard, I mean, not every corner, but the world globally has come to know Jesus. This works. This works. All right, so there's so much more that I would love to say, so much more that I could say, but I want to end by importantly reflecting on the one warning here. There is a warning. Here's the warning. You're the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall that be restored? And the inferred answer is it can't be. So it's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. Now I remember when I first preached this passage, I'd first become a pastor. So I'd literally just come out of engineering. I was a youth pastor. And by the way, my engineering background, so I worked at Sasol. I worked at a plant that made chlorine gas, as one does. And our main raw material was salt. Truckloads, trainloads. Listen, I know salt, eh? no salt. And I was like, hey, Jesus, you know that salt is the most chemically stable compound. Like, it doesn't lose its taste. It's like physically impossible. Doesn't Jesus know that? I remember getting all tripped up about this point that salt can't lose its flavor. And I think that's the point. Salt doesn't lose its saltiness, just like light doesn't lose its lightiness. It doesn't. And one of the points of this is that, yes, it's unthinkable. It is unthinkable that Christians would hide their light and disengage from society. It's unthinkable. But the reason the warning's there is because it's not going to happen automatically. I mean, that's why Jesus taught his disciples in the first place, because it's not automatic. That's why Matthew took great care in writing down these words for us. It takes great intentionality to live it out. And that's why second places ministry, like in this area of our workplace, such a big part of our lives. It's literally entirely about how do Christians fortify each other in the faith because of particular challenges that each industry faces, ethical and faith challenges, and how to encourage each other to be salt and light. Like, there's got to be some intentionality. That's why it's here as a warning. But there's a deeper part to this warning. But it's not just that, hey, this isn't going to be automatic. It's not just that if we don't do this, the darkness wins and the decay continues. There's that too. We do this for the sake of the world around us. But there's a third level to the warning, and that's what happens to us as Christians. Something negative takes place on the inside when we forsake our calling to be salt and light. If we do retreat and hide, we're going to experience that negatively on the inside. So the phrase, lose its saltiness, literally means to become empty. So you were full and you became empty. Used 4 times in the New Testament, twice in the Gospels in this teaching, but twice in Paul's letters, where it literally is about people who were wise, who became foolish. Same word, lose saltiness, as become fools, like you just empty inside. I mean, they applied to salt, that's why we say lose saltiness, but applied to salt, it means to become insipid. I mean, who out there, life goal, I want to be insipid. You know, it's this emptiness on the inside. The other day, Kristen and I, a few weeks ago, were sitting at a park in a suburb we drive to sometimes on a Monday. It's my day off, and we go and have a picnic in the park. And we hadn't been there, actually, for about a year. And we're sitting there in the park, and this young gentleman comes up to us, 20 years old, like well-dressed, well-spoken. He says, sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to ask you, where do you find fulfillment in life? I'm like, okay, put down the Coke. You know, and I just immediately just said, well, listen, from my perspective, Christian, just jump into this idea, because that's what he was dealing with, is this emptiness. He's 20 and just like zero, he's just apathetic about everything. And I start talking to him about this sense of purpose that comes from being a Christian, the antidote to emptiness, the antidote to living an insipid life is salt and light. And so perhaps for many Christians who feel like your Christian journey has become empty or tasteless, it's because we're not actively living out the beautiful attitudes and living out what it means to become followers of Jesus. It's an emptiness that happens. Loses saltiness is a warning of emptiness. But then it's a double warning, because, and what good is that except to be thrown out and trampled on? And I don't have time to get into it, but I just have to say this. Isn't that ironic? Here's the irony, if you didn't see it. If you look at the beautiful attitudes, you look at that list, I mean, one of them in particular, meek. Like, what does meek mean? What does meek mean? Weak. There was a Brett said last week, weak. Like, gentle. In a sense, if you look at the Beatitudes, like if you're not a Christian and you listen to that last week, you're like, man, those people, they're like, you know, they're just going to get walked all over. But the irony is what Jesus is saying, no, you don't get walked over when you live these out. You become a walkover when you don't live these out. When you don't live as a Christian, empty, meaningless, and thrown out to be trampled on. I want to lead us now in a time of prayer. And we're really going to pray with the boldness that we've received in this passage already. So I want to invite you to bow your heads, if that's helpful to you in praying, and close your eyes just to reflect a little bit. I think if we're honest, all of us, to greater and lesser degrees, could do with an increase in saltiness and lightiness. And Jesus' very first line in this sermon expressed how that happens. Blessed are those who realize their need for him, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And so, Lord Jesus, we come before you this morning. And I come with great confidence based on that opening line that you spoke all those years ago into us today. Blessed are those who realize their need for you and your grace, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We come before you. I believe most of us, if not all of us, needing, just having a sense that our lives could be a lot more salty. We could be a lot more visible. In that prayer that we prayed earlier, blessed are those who revile and persecute you, we acknowledged, but we haven't made it known that we are yours. And I think, if we're honest, most of us would say that's true. And so, Jesus, we ask you, as the good shepherd, as the one who dispensed the Holy Spirit to us to animate these beautiful attitudes in our lives, do that. Animate them, bring them to life, not just internally, but externally. Give us the boldness and the happiness to go about our lives living out these ways. In general view for all to see, come with me. And may you use us to be salt and light. We really need that. In our families. In church, you're out there and your family, you're outnumbered, or your heart is broken for loved ones, or you're not sure of their place with the Lord Jesus. And this is in particular your prayer. And in our workplaces, and in our neighborhoods. Lord Jesus, you yourself said that you are the light of the world. And so we know this light that we shine is actually only a reflection, or is a display of what you deposit inside us. And so we ask that you do that. And as we've heard today, a little goes a long way, God. And so we pray that people around us will have a tangible interaction with the kingdom of heaven as we set our minds and our hearts to live out your ways. Really, we pray, would people sense the kingdom of heaven in their midst, not because of our shouting about or drawing attention to ourselves, but simply putting our heads down and living out these beautiful attitudes by your power and your grace. Would people have a sense of light increasing and salt preserving and bringing flavor to their lives because we're around? We can only ask that, hope for it, set our minds on it, pray that you do it, Lord Jesus.